blog post that has an ID of 2. Awesome. At this point, let's just hollow out all of the other values in this template. So for example, the username of whoever authored the posted on date, and then the body content. Now, the username of who created the post, that's actually the trickiest of these three details. And the reason for that is because if you look in the database, in our posts table, a row for a blog post does not actually contain the username of the person who created it. All we're storing is the ID of the user account that created it. So how do we actually access their username string of text like Brad or Barks a lot? Well, from a raw mechanical MySQL database perspective, yes, our database knows that this is a foreign key, right? Remember when we set up the migration in Laravel to create this database shape? Yes, the database is aware of that foreign key relationship, but in terms of Laravel and our blog post model and our metaphor of, what is a blog post, we haven't spelled out that relationship yet. So that's what we need to do right now. We need to go into our blog post model and spell out the relationship that's based upon this user ID column, right? Then it will be a piece of cake to actually access the string value of Brad or Barks a lot. So here's what we do. We go into our blog post model. So in our models folder, go into post.php. And in our class, so maybe below this protected line, let's create a function. You can name it anything, but let's say public function. I'll just name it user, parentheses, curly brackets. And now in the body of the function, we just return a relationship. So we say return $this to represent sort of the blog post class as a whole. We're going to look inside that and call a method of belongs to, semicolon. In this function, we give it two things, so a comma b. The first thing we give it is the class that the blog post class belongs to, right? So in other words, the name of this file is a blog post, so we're saying a blog post belongs to a user. So instead of a, this would be uppercase user for the user model, colon class. And then the second argument, instead of b, that's the column name that the relationship is powered by. So that's user underscore ID, right? In our database, this is the column name that powers the lookup or the relationship or the join. Cool, so let's save this. And actually, to prove a point, let's not name our function user. Let's name our function pizza, because I don't want you to think there's anything magical about the function name. It doesn't need to be named user just because we're dealing with the user model. So the function can be anything, but we spelled out our relationship. So let's save this. Okay, and now go into your Blade template. And for me, it's around line 15, but we see posted by, and then get rid of the hard-coded kitty dough. It would be double curly brackets. It would be $post. Look inside that for pizza, whatever we named our function in the model. And because we returned a relationship in that function, Laravel is going to give us that instance of a user, right? Like an object that metaphorically represents the correct user. So we can look inside that for whatever property we want. And it just so happens the property I'm interested in is their username, right? That column value from the database. So we can save this, and if you refresh, instead of kitty dough, awesome, you see your actual username value. Now, we don't need to actually have that function be named pizza. So if you go back into your model, I just didn't want you to think that the function name needed to perfectly match anything. So it doesn't need to be pizza though. Let's just call it lowercase user, save that, and then this would be, user, just so it makes sense. Cool. Let's start to fill in the rest of the details. So let's make this posted on date come to life. So get rid of it. It would just be double curly brackets, $post. Look inside that for the created at property, and then we're actually going to call a function on that of format. Here we can provide a string and spell out the exact way that we want to format the date, right? Like, do we want the month first or the day first? Do we want the year as just a 2-digit year or a 4-digit year, the ordering, so on and so forth. So I'm just going to say lowercase n slash lowercase j slash uppercase y. If you save that and refresh, awesome, there's the date, the actual posted on date. And then finally, let's just adjust the actual content itself. So in our Blade view, leave this div with a class of body content, but empty out everything that lives inside it. And let's just have double curly brackets, $post, look inside it for body. You can save that, reload, awesome. And if I go into the URL bar and visit my first blog post, perfect. And now for the final detail in this lesson, let's set it up so that when you create a brand new post, when you submit the form, it redirects you to this URL, this single view URL for the new post that you just created. So let me log in and click create post. We just need to update the create post function in our post controller. So if you go into post controller, right, we have our function in the post controller called store new post. If you look down just a little bit, this is the line where we're actually creating that new item in the database. Let's actually store that in memory. So I'm going to say $ right before it and just make up a name. Let's call it new post equals whatever this returns. So instead of just returning that awkward, string of text that says, hey, let's return a redirect, semicolon, and let's have double quotes instead of single quotes so we can perform a bit of string interpolation. But let's just redirect them to /post/ and then we would want this to be a number, right? Whatever the ID of the blog post you just created is. So curly brackets to do something dynamic in a string. Let's say new post, right? And then we're just going to look inside this, so -- for its ID value. Cool, and then just to really show off and see how awesome Laravel is, before the semicolon here, we could say, you could tack on a with call for a flash message. And, you could give it two things. The first would be success. The second thing would just be, new post successfully created. If we give that a save and then actually create a new form, my third post, this is a test, and then submit the form. Awesome. It redirects me to that perfect URL. There's a flash message. Beautiful. In our next lesson, we're going to learn how to support the popular Markdown format for the actual body content. Let's keep our momentum rolling, and I will see you then.